So I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. Food, football, no politics. Okay, maybe. All right. Well, anyway. All right, so let's get started here for this. Let me ask you, have any of you ever been on a cruise? Okay, I probably never will be on one. Gretchen and I have talked about it, but Gretchen can look at a toy boat in a bathtub and get seasick. And so I doubt that will happen. But from what I've been told, since this is Thanksgiving, we've got to talk about Mayflower. Cruises go from about 3 to 10 days, average is 7 days, about $1,500. Mayflower trip went 66 in a little boat. Over half the people died. It's pretty high cost there. So the Puritans and the Pilgrims, by the way, that's a cross-section. Puritans, they were subdivided here. First traveled to the Netherlands to establish a Christian church that would be free of government influence. That's what drove this. Okay? And so, let's think about that here in the United States, because we were giving thanks. Thanks for food, the harvest, for the country we live in. So let's ask the questions, what are we free from? And what is freedom actually for? Because it's something we take for granted here in the States, but this comes up. So what freedoms do we have? We have the freedom of speech. Oh, that's a biggie. Everybody likes that freedom, especially online. We've got the freedom to worship. Okay? We've got the freedom from fear. And by the way, these are all Norman Rockwell prints that were commissioned during the war, during World War II. Okay? And for parents, when you're tucking your kids in at night, that's big. All right? The fact that we in the United States are protected by 2 different oceans. And the only countries that we have to fear, that are next to us are Canada, which, if they attacked us, they'd apologize before they did it, or Mexico. And so we don't have fear like this. But the majority of people in the rest of the world do. What's going to happen tomorrow? Who's going to invade us next? And then this is what we just got through celebrating. Fear from want. Got plenty of food. Anybody not have enough food on Thanksgiving? Probably most of you are still working through leftovers. Okay? By the way, this was the Thanksgiving bit by Norman Rockwell in 1943. A woman in Europe with a small GI pan in front of her and a little bit of food, giving thanks. So that's what the generation before us was grateful for. And probably we're going to be grateful when we run out of leftovers, because we're sick of turkey at that point. But then we ask ourselves, are we truly free? Because this is a country of freedom, but are we truly free? Just want to ask you to put that in perspective. Freedom of speech. Cry fire during the next Star Wars movie or the next Marvel movie and see if you have totally unlimited freedom of speech. Freedom of religion. Try praying publicly at the next football game and see what happens. Freedom of fear. I challenge you to go downtown about 2 o'clock in the morning by yourself, walk around, see what happens. Freedom from want. Oh, that's a big one. But are we really free from it? Because everything in our society is based upon want. Just a side point there. Just want to remind us, since we are in church, covetousness is a sin. But that's a problem. Because in American society, we really don't believe that. We got lots of different names for covetousness. We call it social media. We call it advertising. We call it marketing. We call it impulse buying. I hate to break this to you, because marketing people are so good. But the next time you're having a bad day, and you just say, I just need fill in the blank. Your favorite gum, your favorite ice cream, your favorite Coke. Notice I said Coke. Because in my family, we're Christians. We don't utter the Pepsi word. That, just a side point, that's the only way my sister and I entertained ourselves growing up. is going to the mall because we didn't want to go to the mall, but we went if Dad was going just to watch him take the Pepsi challenge and just have him sip one of them and go, that's the Coke, that's what I want. But sir, you need to take it. No. That's the Coke. I want the Coke, all right? But anyway, advertising, impulse buying, it's all covetousness. Our entire economy is built on this, if you haven't realized it already. And it's all jealousy. And social media really heightens it. Just some things that might pop through your brain when you're looking through people's social media feed. Oh, look at that, they're skinny. I hate them. Oh, look at their kids. Their kids are nice. Mine are terrible. They got a new car. I've got an old car. Their husband has a six-pack, and mine has a cooler. Not saying that Gretchen's ever stated that to me publicly, okay? But the catch is, think about it. When's the last time you saw any Facebook or online media post saying, you know, it's just been an average day, didn't get a promotion, the kids were irritating, I burned the food, you know. No. What are we doing? We're taking pictures of this food and, you know, where we're ever eating. I still don't get that. I don't care what you're eating at the restaurant. And yet everybody posts this for some reason. I don't know, okay? But the point is, we have a lot of things that we say that we're free, but are we really free? And what is that freedom for? In America, we want freedom because it allows us for the pursuit of happiness. That is written into our founding documents. And we're very good at that in America. We pursue happiness, but we don't quite find it. And that's the question. We believe that unfettered freedom, this is within the United States culture, is what will make us happy. Stop and think about it. Okay? All social arguments, legal arguments, etc., it all boils down to Americans I want to be able to do what I want, when I want, and I don't want anybody to say anything about it. So you can call yourself libertarian, you can call yourself this, but basically, that's the bottom line that drives a lot of this in America. Remember, historically, you know, with the Mayflower and the like, there were two groups of people that came to America. One group came for religious reasons. They were going to make the shining city on a hill, you know, based on God's laws. Another group of people came here because there were no laws and total freedom. And that's the juxtaposition. Since this is Texas, I would just like to point out the next time you go to the Alamo that the signs of the number of people who died there, the sign with the biggest number are Tennesseans, not Texans. Okay, just side point. But I must be honest historically about that. The majority of Tennesseans who came and died at the Alamo, that's because they were running away from things like the law. Okay? And hey, let's go to Texas where there is no law. And it's like, well, we can leave and get hung for that stuff or stay here. Might as well stay here and at least we'll die with some glory and people remember us and forget about those murders we committed. Okay? Those type thing. But from the 1950s to 2010 approximately, the level of people saying they were happy in America didn't even budge, even though buying power tripled. So we had lots of stuff. We could buy lots of stuff, but we still weren't happy. Imagine that. But then what happened around 2010? Social media. First texting, and then all the apps. And amazingly, in 2020, 48% of Americans said they were happy. Last year, 39% did. As a researcher, I'm going, what external variable may have impacted this? And yes, correlation is not causation. However, okay, there's a lot going on with that. There are limits to our freedom. You ever heard this one? Or did you say this when you were in college? Or when you first get in those jobs and out there? If only I could have the freedom of college with the irresponsibility of high school. Because wasn't high school great? I didn't have to pay for anything. Mom and Dad did. But they had these rules. And I had to be home by midnight. And I had to do this and I had to do that. And then I went to college. Woohoo! And I was free. until that tuition bill came in. And, I got to buy books. And, wait a minute. Now when I screwed up in class, mom and dad aren't there to take care of it, and the professor doesn't care. I want that irresponsibility of high school, but the freedom of college. But guess what? Life doesn't work that way. But yet, how many adults, is this really what our quest for, quote, happiness is? This is really what we're searching for? And we never accepted the fact that that's not real? That's not reality. Now, the culture of therapy reflects this. You got jury trials and self-help books. Remember a couple of years ago, the kid whose defense was affluenza? Okay. For those of you here who don't remember, it was right down the road in Rendon. Okay. There's a person who their card broke down right outside Rendon Baptist Church. And the youth minister and several of the kids and the people from the church came out to help them. And there was a 16-year-old kid in his jacked up pickup truck that he had gotten. And he and his buddies were out, and they were drunk, and they were plastered, and they came around that curve and took out everybody and ran. And when caught in front of the judge, the defense attorney's bit was, he comes from rich parents, and he's never had to take responsibility for his actions, so he suffers from affluenza. Now, I don't know about you, but if I was the judge, I thought that would be a perfect opportunity to say, I have a cure for that. It's called 10 years in the pen, and he will no longer suffer from that anymore. But instead, he was allowed to go free because, poor boy. His mommy and daddy didn't teach him, and his mom didn't hug him enough when he was a child. Okay? And he was gone on probation. And if you remember, that broke down because this guy, I'm sorry. It's like before spring break, I tell all my college students, don't post what you're doing. It's going to come back to bite you. And this kid did. He was on probation, but he was posting all these parties he was going to and getting drunk. And so the authorities said, well, you broke probation. Now you're going to jail. And Mama said, my poor baby can't go to jail. So she took him and ran to Mexico. But they were eventually caught. And now happily both he and his mama are in jail, where apparently both of them are learning how not to suffer from affluenza. Okay? But the catch is, this is in our society. And it drives a lot of this. It's a book that came out about 10 years ago called The Question of God. Great book, by the way. It's a PBS special. Dr. Armand Nicolai. And if you don't know who that guy is, that's okay. He's an academic. But he teaches psychiatry at Harvard Medical School. Okay? And he's an expert on Freud. And several years ago, he sort of got tired of teaching Freud, and so he wanted to sort of get his students talking, so he changed his psychiatry class, and it was a discussion between C.S. Lewis and Freud. Okay? And by the way, Dr. Armandi became close to the Freud family, and they allowed him to have access to his letters and all his personal stuff. And for those of you who don't know, C.S. Lewis was first an atheist. Okay? And then he became friends with J.R.R. Tolkien, who wrote The Lord of the Rings. And they were discussing God and religion. And C.S. Lewis, in grappling with this, apparently, because in his notes, it says he took a, quote, vacation into the interior of England. And in Freud's notes, it says that he was visited by an Oxford academic. Didn't say who. Most likely it was that. Because Lewis had always been affected by Freud and like. And so apparently they had a weekend debate. Because Freud was an atheist. Okay? And after that, C.S. Lewis became a Christian. And what Dr. Nicolai goes through in this book is just the arguments from both of them. Where to go one way or the other. He brings up some questions that apply to us in our studies today. There is no free lunch, which all of us have to discover the hard way at some point in time. C.S. Lewis, as an atheist, said, I was angry, I believe there was no God, and I was angry that he didn't exist. How many people have you talked to, or maybe even had this thought yourself, because it's a legitimate issue to be dealt with? There is evil in this world. If there was a loving God who is omnipotent, there shouldn't be evil in this world. So how can there be a God? And one response would be, okay, you're right, there is no God. Is there still evil in the world? Now what? Now what? What's going to fix it? Politics? Oh, that's done a great job. Okay? Social movements? We're still in the same boat. And that's what Lewis grappled with. He had fought in World War I. He had seen the worst humanity can offer. And he's going, okay, now what? And C.S. Lewis struggled against becoming a believer because when he got right down to it, he said, I wanted my freedom. I wanted to be God. I wanted to be the one in charge. And guess what? That's human. St. Augustine, his famous prayer, Lord, give me discipline, give me chastity, but not yet. Because I still want to do what I want to do. I'm a professor, and it is my firm belief that most academics are atheists because they don't want to accept that there's anybody who can tell them what to do. Because we live in ivory towers, and we have guaranteed jobs, and we have the freedom to do what we want. And we really don't want to think that anybody could tell us what to do. But C.S. Lewis is honest enough to think about this. And he realized what he defined as freedom was just slavery. Slavery to yourself. Selfishness. Okay? We all have limits. Fish are happy. They're free in the water, but they'll die on land. You got a Ford truck, you can't use a Chevy manual. Who would even think about going to Chevy? Okay, right? Absolute freedom, unlimited freedom, is an illusion. And how can I prove that to you? How many of you watched football yesterday? It was a split day for me. Bama beat Auburn on the last play. I was popping blood pressure medication. I was like, what's going on? And Georgia Tech did not win, shall we say. Okay? However, notice something about a good football game? Your team wins, but do they get to do what they want? All sports have rules. And those rules have to be obeyed so that you can be truly free to play the game, right? If there were no rules, you can't play the game. Just like every one of us kids playing in the neighborhood, if any kid started changing the rules, wait a minute, no. If you're just going to change the rules, I'm quitting. I'm not going to play. There has to be rules for you to be free to truly enjoy something. That's the simple reality. Without that, none of us would enjoy football. So, true freedom then is the exact opposite of what America think. It's not the freedom to do what you want. It is not freedom from all responsibility to God and others. That bondage is selfishness. True freedom is freedom from your silly little self in order to live responsibly, to live for God, to live for others. What did you do with your children? You tried to get them to think about other people. You tried to get them to bear responsibility for their actions. You tried to get them to think long-term, not short-term. What are you doing? You're basically trying to tell them it's not about you. It's not all about you. Before I left D.C., one of the other Jefferson Fellows and I were having lunch, and he's a sociologist. And we were talking about, this is during COVID, end of COVID, and talking about the fact, I said, I wonder if there's studies done that, all religions around the world, all religions, at their core is the concept of money's not going to make you happy, and think about other people, not yourself. And I said, as the percentage of people in the United States going to organized religious services goes down, you've seen a correlation between that and the percentage of people saying they're unhappy, they're depressed, they're anxious, etc. And I said, forget about which religion you may adhere to, but our religion, the idea is trying to get you out of yourself and to think about others. And I said, I wonder if we could do a study saying as that goes down, levels of depression, anxiety, everything else goes up. And he just laughed and he says, we've done the studies. And yes, you're right. And it's going to get worse. Because the focus on self doesn't bring us freedom. It brings us anxiety. It brings us bondage to keeping track with whoever we're near, trying to do whatever the cultural precedent is of right then that's going to change tomorrow. And it doesn't make us happy. But Christ offers us a lot of freedom. He offers us freedom from guilt. Okay? Removing your guilt is not a function of redefining what sin is. And saying, that's not bad. But deep down inside we do. Okay? I saw a video on social media. And basically there was a discussion with several young women. And they were talking about the fact that sex really doesn't matter, and you should be able to have as many sexual partners as you want, and this shouldn't be the issue. And so they were asked, I said, okay, so you say that doesn't matter. I said, yeah. So what's your body count, i.e. how many people have you slept with? And all 6 of the women said, I really don't want to say. Well, if it doesn't matter, and it's not that big of a deal, then why does it bother you? And by the way, is there a double standard? Yeah, absolutely. And do guys brag about their body count? Absolutely. But does it affect guys too? Absolutely. But Christ says, yeah, you screwed up. Yes, you've sinned. But I can give you freedom from that. I can give you a clean slate. Mark Twain said, man is the only animal that blushes or needs to. Did you ever stop and think about that? If we are purely and only just a product of evolution, we're just an animal. So why do we blush? Why do we feel bad? You don't see a lot of, cheetahs on the Serengeti as one takes one antelope down and the other cheetahs come up and said, oh, I'm so sorry. I started eating before y'all got here. I should have shared. Okay? There is forgiveness with God in Psalms. Jesus said, come to me, you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest, and you will find rest and peace unto your soul. That's here. That's now. And he said, my burden is light. Just want to remind you of that. Because again, American culture, we go to extremes. Balance is not a thing we do. And so this would be a topic for a separate lesson. But if your religion is such that you are so worried about obeying every one of the rules, and if you don't, oh no, God's going to strike me down and like, that's not what Scripture states either. And as my grandfather told me once, growing up, he says, son, God developed religion to be a support to us, not a burden. And if yours is a burden, either you or God has done something wrong. And he leaned over and smiled and says, I'll give you a boy. It's not. Okay? And it's like, you trying to tell me something, Granddaddy? What is this? From yourself. The truth. Everyone is a slave to sin. But the lies we hear. Psychology, and don't get me wrong, therapists are great, and we'll get into that in a minute, but what do you hear a lot in our society? I need to find myself. I don't like myself. I'm trying to improve myself. I'm not trying to find it, okay? But again, in our society, that's what we're talking about. In the dictionary, there's over 50 words that start with self that are negative. Self-applause, self-absorption, self, and that's bad. And yet we push self. How come humanity developed so many words about self that are bad if, finding yourself is all there is to be? Most therapy is found on that. And I love Christian Lash. He was a sociologist for several years ago. He says, the naive belief that our wishes govern the universe is precisely what religion attacks. And yet, over the past couple years, I keep hearing this phrase people tell me. I'm going to put it out there to the universe. And you think the universe is going to do what? Okay? Because see, even if we don't believe in God, we want to believe there's something out there working on our behalf, right? But I hate to break it to you, the universe doesn't care. Christ offers freedom from fear and anxiety. Fear and worry still drive us. Recent medical studies show that 2/3 of all medical visits are caused by a problem by stress and anxiety. And that was a study before COVID. So I got no clue what it is now. Okay? Jesus said, do not worry about what you will eat or what you will drink or what you will wear. Don't worry about it. And yet, we do. Summary of 12 years of psychiatric research found that over 90% of the studies supported the idea that religion benefits mental health. But please note, the average American goes to church more than twice as often as the average psychologist. Now, please do not get me wrong. Good psychologists, Christian psychologists, worth their weight in gold. But I need to make you aware of something. Most psychologists got into the profession because they were screwed up to begin with and they were trying to figure themselves out. Okay? I'm not saying that they're doing anything wrong. That's not what I'm stating. I'm just stating just because they have a PhD at the end of the name does not mean they have wisdom. Okay? And so just be aware. Yes, sir. Now, this is wisdom that's about to speak. Yes, sir.
In reference to freedom, we have freedom within the framework of our government as long as it remains within the framework of law.
Yes.
We have freedom, but it's within the framework of law. In regards to spiritual freedom, we have spiritual freedom, as long as it's within the framework of believing and obeying Jesus Christ and continuing until the end of time.
Because in that case, we have grace.
Yeah.
So for those of you listening, you're 97 now? In January. Okay. This is 97 years of wisdom, okay, saying that within the context of our government, we have freedom within the context of obeying the laws. Within the context of Christ, we have freedom as we believe and trust Him. And in we have freedom to obey the laws. We have okay. If you there are Admiral goers have less risks. Goers across the nation, if they limited that to the southeast and chicken fried steak, who knows? Okay. Now, 2 generations ago, and this gets into the issue of death. 2 generations ago, people said they hoped they would have a long, lingering death in order to get their affairs in order. This generation says, I want to die in my sleep. I want to keep myself as entertained as possible so I don't have to think about it and then just die. But the ultimate freedom we have is this. Jesus said, whoever would save his life will lose it. and whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. The ultimate fear we have, what we can't get away with, no matter how much money and the like. Right now, Silicon Valley billionaires are sinking huge amounts of money trying to extend life because that's their ultimate fear. But in Christ, we don't have to fear that. We still have to deal with loss. We still have to deal with that pain. But we don't have to deal with the fear of what's happening and whether we will see loved ones again in Christ. And so I leave you with this Christmas movie. It's called Freud, and it's based on the book I showed you, The Question of God. Okay? So let me show you a...
Professor Lewis?
Yes?
Hello, Freud.
Ah,
Nice to meet you.
and you.
Good luck.
Dr. Freud.
Sit, please. Not there. That's the transformation couch. Be careful. Why would you come here to see me if you disagree so passionately with my views?
You've insisted all your life that the very concept of God is ludicrous.
Yes.
Clash between God and Satan.
Ah, but I did not say whose side I was on. I consider what people tell me far less interesting than what they choose not to tell me.
Have you frightened off your professor yet?
Ah, not yet. Soon, perhaps. You challenge my disbelief, is that correct?
I do.
Well done. Good. Too late to turn back now. It seems to me, Professor, you never matured enough to face the terror of being alone in the dark.
What is it you think comes out for you, though?
Yeah, we're all terrified. So you bury your doubts, you bury your memories of the war. But at the core of your being, we're all cowards before death.
Now, at the bottom line, as comes from Dr. Armity's book, he says, as a psychiatrist, one of the things we have to assess is the treatment and belief, how well does it work in the real world? So let me summarize it this way. C.S. Lewis was an atheist. He became a Christian. He lived his life. He faced death without fear. He had a heart attack. They rushed him to the hospital. They actually revived him and brought him back. His friends were coming back to see him and they said, this is great. Congratulations. He's like, what are you congratulating me for? I had a foot in heaven. Now I have to come back and do taxes. He says, what is this? No, I was nearly there. Freud was a genius. He received accolades his entire life for his brilliance and his insights, and he committed suicide. That's where the beliefs led them. Okay? And so I ask you to think over this coming week and into the holidays, what truly gives us freedom? Y'all have a good week. Take care.